A ceasefire was announced, then Beirut was bombed. Then Washington went silent. Here is what that silence actually means. Iran spent 40 years quietly building a trap, not a flashy one, not a headline-grabbing one. A patient, layered, invisible one, designed for exactly this moment. And over the skies of Lebanon, 8 Israeli F-15s flew straight into it. To understand why this is seismic, you need to understand what the F-15 actually is. This isn't a training aircraft. This is a long-range strike platform with advanced electronic warfare systems, beyond visual range missiles, and the reach to hit any target in the region. Israeli F-15 pilots represent a decade or more of accumulated combat knowledge. You cannot replace that quickly. Losing 8 of these aircraft in a single operational window is not a tactical setback. It is a structural shock. And here is the detail that should alarm every military planner watching. They weren't shot down by another aircraft. They were destroyed by a ground-based missile network that their electronic countermeasures could not detect or defeat. How? That is the question military analysts from Washington to Beijing are now urgently asking. And the answer reveals a doctrine that Iran has been patiently building for decades, designed not to fight Western air power in the sky, but to neutralize it from the ground up. We are going to break that doctrine down. But first, understand what was happening in Beirut the same night. 10 minutes, over 100 bombs, more than 300 dead. That is what happened in Beirut. Israel called it Operation Eternal Darkness. And in terms of single-event death tolls, it surpassed the Beirut port explosion of 2020. The event that was supposed to be the worst thing Lebanon would ever live through in a generation. But here is the detail that makes this different from a standard military strike. The neighborhoods hit, places like Barber and Corniche al-Mazrah, were not Hezbollah strongholds. They were mixed civilian areas. Over 1 million displaced Lebanese had fled to these exact neighborhoods because they were considered safe. Schools had been converted into shelters. And then the bombs fell, without warning. Israel's justification: Hezbollah fighters had relocated into these mixed neighborhoods, and the IDF would pursue them wherever they went. But think about what that logic means in practice. It means that any neighborhood in Lebanon can become a target at any moment, based on alleged militant presence that civilians have no way to verify, and no safe place left to run from. Dr. Ghassan Abu Sida, a surgeon at the American University of Beirut, described 70 critically injured patients arriving simultaneously. He said the compressed time window was intentional, designed to overwhelm the health system before it could respond. Crush injuries, amputations, an 11-month-old baby requiring emergency brain surgery. This is the human cost that diplomatic press releases do not carry. And here is the central paradox. The strikes came hours after a ceasefire was announced. Trump called Lebanon a separate skirmish. But for the people in Barber that night, that distinction meant nothing. Something important is happening in the space between Washington's diplomatic language and the reality on the ground. And we need to talk about it. Now let's talk about how 8 F-15s actually went down. Because this isn't just a Lebanon story. This is a story about how Iran spent decades building a system designed for exactly this confrontation, and why its effectiveness is now reverberating in every major military capital on Earth. The doctrine is called anti-Xanaxeria denial, AAD for short. The goal is not to match Western air power in the sky. That is a battle Iran knows it can't win. The goal is to make the sky so dangerous, so layered with threat, that operating in it becomes catastrophic. And the core of that system is passive radar. Israeli F-15s are equipped with sophisticated electronic warfare systems designed to detect and jam radar emissions from enemy air defenses. These systems have worked in every previous engagement. But passive radar doesn't emit. It listens. It tracks targets using existing electromagnetic activity, radio signals, civilian frequencies, anything in the environment. You cannot jam what isn't broadcasting. On top of that, the system wasn't centralized. It was distributed. A layered network of systems operating at different altitudes, different ranges, different electromagnetic profiles. Some for long-range high-altitude interception, others for mid-range maneuvering, others for close engagement. When Israeli aircraft entered Lebanese airspace, they weren't flying into a standard threat environment. They were flying into a preloaded kill zone. The result: Israeli countermeasures that had worked in every previous engagement failed. The aircraft were not outflown. They were out-taught, trapped in an information architecture they didn't fully understand until it was too late. And in Washington, in Beijing, in Moscow, and in Seoul, Military planners are now running a calculation they have never had to run before. Now let's talk about the ceasefire, because what was announced and what actually exists may be two very different things. Trump posted it on Truth Social. 10 days. Netanyahu and Lebanese President Joseph Aoun invited to the White House. And here is the first red flag. Hezbollah is not mentioned by name. This is not a minor diplomatic detail. This war is not between Israel and the Lebanese state. The Lebanese army hasn't been fighting Israel. The actual belligerent is Hezbollah. And Hezbollah is not a party to this ceasefire in any formal sense. So what was actually announced? A genuine agreement, or a diplomatic wish made public and hoped into existence. Hezbollah's response was careful. A senior MP confirmed they had been briefed, not directly by Washington, but through the Iranian ambassador in Beirut. Their position: they would abide by the ceasefire as long as Israel 100% did, meaning a complete end to all hostilities. And then Israel stated clearly, it would not withdraw from southern Lebanon during the ceasefire period. Think about that structural contradiction. Israel says ceasefire, but we stay in southern Lebanon. Hezbollah says ceasefire means full withdrawal. These are not positions that can coexist. This is the same contradiction that collapsed the previous ceasefire, which lasted from November 2024 to March 2025. Israel continued striking what it called Hezbollah targets, almost daily. Hezbollah hadn't disarmed. Each side believed the other was in breach. And then it ended. Why is Trump pushing this ceasefire now? Because his real target is not Lebanon. His real target is a deal with Iran, a nuclear or security agreement that would be the defining foreign policy achievement of his second term. Lebanon was getting in the way. When Israel's strikes on Beirut threatened to blow up Iranian diplomatic goodwill, Washington leaned hard on Netanyahu. The pressure worked, partially. Israel redirected its strikes from Beirut's residential zones to southern Lebanon. Not a halt, a calibration. Enough to keep the Iranian diplomatic track alive. Let's pull back to the global picture, because what happened over Lebanon does not stay in Lebanon. The loss of 8 F-15s to a ground-based passive radar network sends a signal to every military in the world, particularly to Russia, China, and anyone else who has been investing in exactly this type of system. Russia sells advanced air defense systems globally. This engagement just validated their effectiveness under real combat conditions against real advanced aircraft. For every potential buyer sitting on the fence, and there are many, Lebanon just became the world's most compelling sales demonstration. China watches with even more direct interest. Denying external military intervention in a potential Taiwan scenario depends on exactly this layered missile architecture. And then there is the Strait of Hormuz. Roughly 20% of globally traded petroleum flows through that narrow waterway. It sits within range of Iranian anti-ship missiles and fast attack craft. Any American military escalation that triggers a Hormuz closure doesn't create a regional problem. It creates a global economic crisis, oil price spikes, energy inflation transmitted to every household on the planet. This is Iran's strategic leverage. It has been deliberately built and deliberately maintained across 4 decades. For Netanyahu, this was supposed to be a once-in-a-generation opportunity. Hezbollah weakened. Trump's backing unconditional. The moment to finish what previous wars couldn't. But Israel has fought multiple wars with Hezbollah, and every single one has ended in a standstill. And from a standstill, Hezbollah has always declared victory by survival. Surviving a confrontation with the most powerful military in the region is itself a political win. The Israeli public is exhausted. Reserve families mobilized repeatedly since October 2023. Through Gaza, the West Bank strikes on Iran, now Lebanon. Netanyahu has had to sell each new front as the decisive final one, but there is no sign of finality anywhere on the horizon. And the people paying the price for that absence, on all sides, are the ones who never had a vote on any of it. Here is where we are. A ceasefire exists on paper that doesn't name the actual combatant. A ground-based missile network just proved it can down advanced Western aircraft at scale. Civilian safe zones in Beirut have collapsed, and Washington is trying to hold together a diplomatic track with Iran while simultaneously backing the military campaign threatening to destroy it. These are not separate stories. They are one story, and it is still in motion. The threshold crossed in these events, militarily, diplomatically, humanly, cannot be uncrossed. The question now is whether the actors involved can find a ceiling before escalation logic carries them past a point where no one has a plan for what comes next. That is a question with no comfortable answer, and it is the question we will keep tracking here. If you want to understand the events shaping the world before they are simplified into headlines, Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. The story doesn't end here.